Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Jones. Welcome to interCHANGE. Lots to talk about today, including the ongoing battle over Governor Scott Walker's collective bargaining measure. And we'll talk about whether Milwaukee businesses should be forced to give employees paid sick days. We'll discuss the decision by the United States to help out with the bombing of Libya. And we'll talk about the life and image of actress Elizabeth Taylor. Introductions now. We have newspaper columnist Joel McNally. Kevin Fischer, longtime broadcaster, political analyst, and oftentimes a fill-in host over at WISN Radio. Denise Callaway, she's the coordinator of business and community partnerships for the Milwaukee Public School System. And Gerard Randall, well-known consultant and local job creation expert. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. So the seemingly never-ending battle over Governor Scott Walker's proposal to take away many of the collective bargaining measures that public employees had enjoyed for years now goes to the Supreme Court. It's going to be interesting to see whether the court agrees to take the matter up and whether it does so before the election involving Justice David Prosser. Denise, I find the timing of this just fascinating.
It is, isn't it? I mean, you know, it's going as I think Gerard, kudos to Gerard, predicted that this is where it was going to go and this is where it was going to end up, and it certainly is. You know, I think the timing of it is such, well, I think there are a couple of things. The timing of the way this is all played out is very interesting. The timing of whether or not the court decides to hear this is also, I think, going to be influenced by some of the things that are happening behind the scenes at the court itself in terms of the disagreements and the problems that the court is having getting along with each other. So I would not be surprised at all to see that this does not come up before the election. I think they're going to wait, and the Chief Justice is going to try to schedule it after the election in April. Then it should be really interesting depending on the outcome of that election. But I think Gerard was also right. This is where it needs to be heard. Let's get to it. Let's hear what the court has to say about whether or not this is an issue where the law was violated, and we do need to go back and have this kind of discussion again, have a vote with everybody present in terms of what needs to happen. But
Denise was making it sound like you were brilliant last week.
Well, I didn't go that far. I said he was right.
Oh, come on, just a little bit more. Well, the newest wrinkle was added today when the Legislative Fiscal Bureau actually published the law. The reference bureau, I'm sorry if I said fiscal. Money. When they actually published the law. It now is law. And the Legislative Reference Bureau has the ability, in fact, they're mandated by law to publish the law after 10 days, 10 working days.
But the Secretary of State was ordered by the judge not to publish it.
Did not affect the Legislative Reference Bureau.
So this is another trick by Republicans to make it law?
No, the Legislative Reference Bureau is following the law that has been established for the mandates that it publishes the law.
Joel. So will this put more pressure?
Is this an announcement tonight from these guys?
It was news this afternoon.
Republicans have found a new way to try to
This was not the Republicans that did this. This is the nonpartisan Legislative Reference Bureau that followed the law and published the law because it was mandated to publish any action by the legislature after 10 working days. They are mandated to do that, and they did that.
So it complicates matters even more. Exactly. Is it a law or not?
Yeah. So what you're saying is Republicans have found another loophole or another trick.
I wouldn't characterize it that way because it wasn't the Republicans that did that.
The district attorney.
That's not what the Republicans didn't do that.
But I don't listen. Yeah, we all know what happened. We know that the district attorney went to court, and a judge has said to the Secretary of State, Doug LaFollette, you cannot publish this until we hear this case, okay? Right. And now you're saying that a way has been found to put it into law anyway. See, the way always existed because that was the law. Stuff happens. The more attention it puts on both the sleazy tactics of the Republicans and the election to the Supreme Court. And that's the important thing about this Supreme Court question. David Prosser, who at the beginning of his campaign announced he was running to complement the Walker administration and the Republicans in the legislature. He says now he disavows that. Of course, he didn't disavow it for months until suddenly Scott Walker was the least popular politician in the state of Wisconsin. But now he disavows it.
Now you're getting sleazy.
David, no, I'm not. I'm not. I'm stating the facts here.
Yeah.
And you know, it would be unbelievable to me if there's some backdoor way that while this is being appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court hasn't decided yet whether to hear it, that we're just being told tonight that they found a way to make it the law.
Would this be another thing that would maybe force the court to say, let us hear this right now?
Well, they'll have to, because now it actually is law. Before this afternoon, it wasn't.
Kevin is telling us what the law is now.
Well, it is. And you stated it well. I mean, and if you don't just want to ignore it, that's fine. But it is actually law now.
Ignoring the Supreme Court.
I believe I've been asked the question.
They seem to be ignoring the judge. They seem to be ignoring all these orders.
They didn't ignore the law.
No.
They did not ignore the law which mandated that they publish the action of the legislature. And the reality here for the Supreme Court is that they now have to decide whether that narrow interpretation or
interpretation.
Well, there was a narrow interpretation by the circuit court judge as to whether proper procedure had been followed.
You can't argue facts. You sit there and laugh like a hyena.
Here's the deal.
That she used for an injunction, and then her injunction is what led to the appeal and the appeals court kicking it to the Supreme Court.
Which hasn't decided
So now, but her premise was that it was not yet law.
Right.
Now it is law.
It is, and since Joel has come to the set once again without the facts, I will add that it has already been appealed. The City of Madison Firefighters and Public Works Union has decided to seek an appeal on this. Right. So it has to go to the state Supreme Court to figure this out.
It will.
I should certainly hope that they would not found. Why don't the Republicans just straightforwardly meet as a legislature, following the open house, the open meeting law, and vote for it again?
They did.
And pass
they
it.
Voted
No,
it.
they did.
They voted. They followed all the laws.
Would that stop any appeals to it?
Pardon me?
Would that stop any appeals?
No, because the left would always try to pick it apart and pick it apart and pick it apart. And that's why they did not decide to go back. And they did decide to go through the courts.
Because
this is such an extremely clear-cut case, isn't it? All right, another court decision this week that upholds a measure by the city of Milwaukee to force employers to provide paid sick time for workers. It was overwhelmingly approved by city voters a few years back, but then tied up in the courts since then. It's something that supporters say is the ethical and the moral thing to do, but other folks, especially employers, say it's a job killer, which will drive businesses out of this city. Denise, does it help Milwaukee, or does it, as some people are saying, it'll make Milwaukee the next Detroit? Businesses will all move out.
Well, there are a lot of things that are being done that could make Milwaukee the next Detroit, just so I wouldn't pin that on
killing public education.
So I think that the clear issue is that it's morally the right thing to do. I don't think that because voters in Milwaukee were forward-thinking enough that they decided that this was something that they felt was important for all residents of this city to be able to have, that we should be penalized for it. I think the fair way to do it, if we want to talk about what the fair thing is to do, is for legislation to be introduced that would make this something that would be required of all employers. The reality that we face is that, we live in a world where people get sick. People should not have to choose between taking care of their own health, taking care of the health of their children, or losing their job. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people have to do, particularly people who are lower income, primarily people of color, primarily women. That should not be a choice that people in this community have to make. It's the right thing to do. It's not just the right thing for Milwaukee. It really is the right thing for Wisconsin. One thing we do know about employees is that employees who feel valued, employees who feel like they have some protection. I know that's kind of maybe an odd thing for us to be talking about in the state now, but employees who do feel like they have the ability to take care of themselves and take care of their families are employees who are likely to be happier employees and more productive employees. And I'll tell you one thing, because I could already hear what's going to happen. If any of us thinks that this is not something that's important, if it's not a right that should be afforded to everybody in this community, then let them go ahead and give up their right to be paid to be paid when they're sick.
Denise is suggesting that maybe there should be legislation that requires all employers statewide to offer this, but more likely, I understand, is the possibility that there would be state legislation stopping this kind of thing.
And really, government has no business telling, again, here comes the snickering and the snide. I haven't even started to talk yet, but that's the disrespect we get from that side of the studio every week. Government has no business telling business how to run business. And this hurts Milwaukee because what it does now is it makes a city of Milwaukee worker that much more expensive than, say, a West Allis worker or a Wauwatosa worker or a Franklin worker or a Wausau worker. And business owners are going to have to say, well, gee, I have options here. I have increased costs. What am I going to do? I'm going to pass them on to my consumers by raising my prices. I may lose business there. I may have to lay off people, or I'm going to just have to take my business elsewhere where it's less expensive to do business. This is indeed a jobs killer. It will hurt City of Milwaukee businesses, and this is another situation where I see that it's going to have to be settled by a higher court.
Milwaukee mayor, even the Milwaukee mayor isn't crazy about the idea.
Kevin, of course, is totally wrong again. This is the people who oppose this law are opposing what's good for business.
But why doesn't the Milwaukee mayor feel that way?
Listen to me a minute. Every decent employer in Milwaukee and in the state of Wisconsin provides sick leave for their employees. Every good, decent employer does that. All the people we work for do that, and every decent employer does. The Milwaukee Metropolitan Association of Commerce, in this case, stood up for its very worst businesses, those businesses that don't provide sick leave for employees. And they tend to be very low-wage workers. They tend, as Denise said, the poorest of the poor have to work at jobs where they don't get sick leave. And you would never guess what those jobs are. An overwhelming majority of those jobs is food service. Do you really want people coming to work in food service jobs sick? Because if they don't come to work sick, they're going to have to give up money to feed their own family.
You're right, Joel. Actually, restaurant people are the ones that are going to be hurt a lot by this.
No, they are not going to be hurt a bit. I'll tell you what hurts restaurants.
Small businesses,
restaurants have gone out of business in this country. Some of the biggest name restaurants ever have gone out of business in this country because people ate at their restaurant, got sick, and died.
You probably know more
that kills business.
You probably know more than anybody sitting here about how
because he's brilliant.
About how difficult it is
to
find people jobs. Yeah. In your opinion, based on your experience in the city of Milwaukee, would this make it tougher or easier to create jobs?
It makes it tougher for two reasons. The business community they will have to find, when those workers are out, some kind of replacement, and replacements cost. Even if it's for a very short period of time, they cost money. So in some ways, it's a double cost. The cost to pay the worker when they're away and the cost to pay for a fill-in for the worker until they come back. The second is uneven imposition of the law. It affects those in Milwaukee, but not employers outside. And so those employers who are outside have a competitive advantage. There's no denying that. They can bid for costs, taking into account whatever it is for benefits that they have to pay versus whatever a Milwaukee company would have to pay for benefits, you write that into your proposals when you bid. You cost that out over the long haul of your business.
And every decent employer provides sick leave.
All right,
just to be clear, the one thing that the mayor said was the reason he was against this legislation the way it stands now is because it made Milwaukee an island. It's, you know, so his thought was, you know, how do we not make Milwaukee an island? How do we take a look at ways in which we can expand this? So it's not like he was against this idea. He was concerned about the fact that it had the potential to make Milwaukee
But no other
an
community is going to buy this across the state. You're finding it more likely that employers will fight it so that it doesn't happen in those local communities.
All right, we have to talk for just a few minutes about U.S. forces taking part in this allied coalition which is dropping bombs on Libya. Is this the start of yet another war that we're going to be involved in, or are we just lending a little bit of a helping hand to push Gaddafi out of power there?
Of course, this is the start of another war, and I do not know a single intelligent person in the United States of America who thinks we should have a third war when we already have two going that have been going on for the past decade. I am really coming to the position that representative democracy doesn't work on the most crucial question of whether a nation should go to war or not. It seems to me like everybody's playing out their roles, and everybody knows that they aren't going to matter. You've got a commander-in-chief who is one of the smartest presidents we've ever had in this country and one of the best presidents, and he's still doing what they all do, which is you've got to look tough to go to war, because if you back off from going to war, you're somehow not tough enough to get reelected.
You stole my thunder.
You've got Democrats in Congress who are speaking out against the war. They have the power to declare war. And they're not exerting it. They're perfectly glad to let him take it on his shoulders and him do it so they don't have to take responsibility for it. The very few members of Congress who are really trying to do something about it are so marginalized. Dennis Kucinich is considered one of the biggest kooks in the country because he believes that Congress actually should have the power to declare war, and the president can't go to war without Congress declaring war.
On the other end of the spectrum, compared to Kucinich, though, you have somebody like John McCain saying we should be taking
Don't let me leave the Republicans out of this, because the Republicans, to me, I think are even more dishonest. For months, they've been actually pounding the drums for more war, and now that the president has done it, they're criticizing him for not doing it the way they would do it. So they've been encouraging going to war, and then when it happens, they're going to snipe at the president anyway. So everybody is just going through the motions, and meanwhile people are dying.
Is it a brilliant move to say, okay, we're only going to fly planes over and not send ground troops in? Or is that...
Both moves have been pretty successful so far.
I'd complain about the same things that the Democrats, some, are complaining about, and some Republicans are complaining about. And for the rap that George Bush took from most Democrats...
Candidate Obama.
And that is from the president, then candidate, that you need an end game. That's not clear. Are we just going to have a policing action? President has said that we can't be the world's policeman. We don't want to do that. As recently as today, there was some criticism as to who's going to lead the effort in NATO in all of this. Is the United States going to take the lead? What is our role? Have we clearly defined what our role is going to be, and when we're going to pull out? When do we declare whatever it is that we're engaged in successful, so that this isn't a long-term quagmire as other wars, as the two that we're in right now? Well, not just Republicans.
Is this a third war, Kevin, or are we just kind of helping out a little bit?
I think it's, and I don't relish this, but I think it's inevitable, because it's already taken the course of action that it points to, that it has to be. But if it's going to be, I say, it can't be half-baked. You can't have the president saying in one instance, we got to take Gaddafi out, but then you can't have him shying away from, criticism for being tough. If you're going to do it, then you're in it to win it. You're going to take him out, take the necessary course of action, and you do it for two reasons. One, to help those poor, innocent people who are being slaughtered and murdered in Libya, and two, to spread peace throughout the world. And I know it's uncomfortable for the president because he criticized President Bush's global war on terror. But if you're going to do it, and then we have to decide who's in charge. Is it the person in charge of Canada's military? Is it the person in charge of Greenland's military?
You can't half-step.
I mean, NATO is divided passionately about this. If you're going to go to war, then go to war, full-fledged, 100%, and have a mission and a goal to take Gaddafi out.
Do we have the time, energy, and money to do that?
I don't know that we do. And more importantly than that, I don't know that we really have the information to make that decision. When we take a look at what's been happening in the Middle East over the past couple of months, and Libya is certainly no exception, one of the major problems that we've had is a failure of intelligence, not only for the U.S., but also for our allies. None of us saw this coming. So what we find ourselves being is in a reactionary mode to what's happening on the ground, guessing what's going on because we don't have good intelligence about what's really happening, and then trying to figure out that we need to do something to try to stop the slaughter of people that's happening there.
I don't think we know what our policy is.
We don't know what our policy is because we can't figure out what's going on the ground there.
This so I think it becomes, we're all brilliant. How about that?
And the problem is, the fight, despite the fact that we don't know what's going on, it was so easy to do. And going to war should never be easy.
Right.
It should be the last resort. It should be the very last thing we do. It should be, we should know exactly what the mission is and where the end is, and we don't know any of that. And I think it's this volunteer military that we think they're always just there to do it and they'll do whatever. Without the draft, no one else feels threatened. We're going to go to war and spend. It said the other day in the paper after the first day or two it was costing $1 billion. We're not going to raise taxes for that $1 billion. We're not going to do anything to raise money. But we'll just do it. And it shouldn't be that easy to go to war.
No one relishes it, but I think we're already.
We're in it.
We're in the stream halfway across. Right. It's kind of tough to turn back now.
All right, shift gear for just a few minutes. Let's talk about the life and the image of actress Elizabeth Taylor. 2 questions. Was she such a huge personality, everybody knew her, because of her beauty or because of her acting skills and the Hollywood machine that she was a product of? And can we ever again see somebody achieve that level in that field, or is she a product of the past?
She crossed into both time eras. My generation, the generation before, and that would be those who were World War II survivors, the Depression survivors that saw her grow up on the screen, that saw her become a beauty icon on the screen and publicly, and then saw her as an activist, and that would be the later generation, the generation after me. So she actually crossed over into multiple generations as a very popular figure and someone that people felt they knew well.
And she was kind of like the Frank Sinatra of acting. Everybody knew her, everybody liked her, everybody had an image of her. Is that day over?
She was also part of the soap opera creation of celebrity, and her personal life, was as much of a piece of her story as anything she did. And she actually had some very good film roles and did some very good acting. But that had nothing to do with the popularity. It was all of those things. It was some of her activism and some of her life and some of her art.
What brought her to everybody's attention, what kept her in everybody's in mind in terms of being someone who was an incredibly talented person, was the talent that she had. You can't look at films like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and not see this woman as an incredible actress, and she had 2 Oscars to back that up. So, I think that it was her talent that really allowed people to really then be open to her humanity.
Not only talent,
she wanted to do.
Great sex appeal, and at a time when there was no cable, there was no internet, still she captured the attention of all the gossip columnists at the time, and that didn't hurt her popularity, but that says a lot about her.
She was a great talent.
All right,
she was a great talent, but boy, she was attractive.
All right, let's go from a superstar of the silver screen to a fight that's been dominating the TV screen. It's the battle of the budget, and Rick Horowitz has been following the machinations out of Madison. He's intrigued, but he can't help noticing that something is missing. Rick.
Well, the calendar says the seasons have changed, but I'm not so sure. In Wisconsin and Washington and pretty much everywhere else, it's still budget cutting season. All sorts of programs going on at the chopping block lately. Some of them certainly deserve cutting, and Lord knows we have to start getting the deficit back under control. So how do we do it? How do we move things back toward balance? That's a conversation I'm happy to have, but it has to be an honest conversation. And right now, it's not. We're broke, say the budget slashers, but they're not broke, not really. Or if they are, it's because they've chosen to be. Because there are two ways to reduce a deficit, to balance a budget. You spend less money and you raise more money. But the budget slashers refuse to allow the second half of that conversation to happen, the part about raising money. They've tied one hand behind their backs and then they say, we have to cut, there's no other option. So you've got ideologues like Scott Walker refusing even to consider higher taxes as part of a budget solution. You've got Grover Norquist making GOP candidates nationwide sign the pledge, no tax increases of any kind for any reason ever. That's not tax policy, that's Taliban. But it's a matter of principle, they say. There's no compromising on principle. Of course there is, or you wouldn't be insisting that I compromise on mine. Because I've got a principle too. Kids are precious. So I need you to tell me why your principle, no new taxes, is more important than my principle, kids are precious. Or my other principle, working people deserve dignity. Or my other principle, bridges shouldn't fall down. Because if you can't convince me of that, then your principle starts to sound less like a principle and more like a strategy. Actually, it starts to sound less like a principle and more like selfishness. I'm okay, who cares about the rest of you? Which is not a winning argument. See, that's another principle of mine. We're all in this together.
Thanks, Rick, and thank you so much for watching. Stay warm. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.